Welcome. Welcome to this Nuyem Event. I'm going to start by way of gratitude, giving thanks for the greatness of Spirit in all things, for the greatness of Spirit in all things, giving thanks for Great Spirit, giving thanks at this time for all of our relations, for the two-legged, for the four-legged, for the ones that swim, for the ones that fly, for the ones that crawl upon the earth, for the ones we cannot touch with our hands, but they were touched by deep inside, giving thanks. Giving thanks at this time for this coming together of hearts in the way of receiving, in the way of understanding, in the way of learning. Giving thanks at this time for this journey of reclamation that we're in as a people and all the things that support us in that. Giving thanks for all the knowledge keepers in our lineage who are with us and who have passed, all the ways in which that knowledge exists in our hearts, in our blood memory, in our spirits. Honoring and giving thanks at this time for our beautiful homeland, for the place where the mountains meet the ocean, for the shifting of the tides, for the shifting of the seasons. Giving thanks at this time for... Sorry. I'll probably cut that out. And a really, really, really itchy nose. Like really, 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 really itchy. Yeah, I'll edit that one out. Giving thanks for the beauty of our homeland, for the place where the mountains meet the ocean, for the shifting of the tides, for the shifting of the seasons and each blessing and beauty that each of the seasons brings. Honoring and giving thanks for all the creatures that we share a home with, all the creations that call our homeland home, making it the wild beauty that it is. Honoring at this time the merging place of people and land, and the ways in which that the land and the elements of our homeland have influenced and inspired our language, our tools, our clothing, our stories, our songs, our ceremonies, and giving thanks for that place in each of our hearts where the beauty of our homeland lives, that beautiful, precious place in our hearts. May it be honored and celebrated and upheld. And giving thanks at this time for the steady drumbeat, echoing the steady drumbeat of our Mother Earth. Giving thanks at this time for all the ways in which that the heartbeat of Mother Earth holds us, guides us, loves us, provides for us. And giving thanks at this time for all that will come from our time together, big and small, seen and unseen. Honoring and giving thanks for the strength of our ancestors, living through us, loving through us, giving through us, speaking through us, and all that gets passed on from them through us, in a good way, in a loving way, in a sacred way. Wah.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I really enjoy when you bring us in with the drum all the time. How are you feeling today, Ab?
Feeling good.
Yeah. What you got for us, man?
Here, Ab.
What's up?
So your number one fans here, Ab. Yotes? Are you gonna say yotes? Not yet. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, that's good.
She just kept reaching for the mic. There she is. She's saying Baba and pointing at you.
Yotes.
Yotes? Yeah. Hear her?
Aw.
Yeah.
Yotes? Yeah, good try. Good job.
Yeah. So I wanted to continue on with the presentation that I started last week.
Awesome. It's all yours. Take it away.
Okay. So I'll go and share my screen here. So I'll just do a quick recap of how far we got last time. So we started off talking about consistency and the importance of having a consistent writing system and how that promotes consistent pronunciation and also is beneficial for learning and teaching language. We also talked about patience. So being patient with the process of learning language and also having patience with yourself as you're learning. Those are some pretty important points to keep in mind when you're starting, before you even start to learn Haisla. So now, this week, I wanted to talk a little bit about code breaking. So if you've seen the movie, The Intimidation Game, starring Benedict Cumberbatch and Keira Knightley, it's a movie about breaking the Enigma code that was used by Germany in World War II. So I watched this movie sometime last year for the first time and heard about it, but I never actually sat down and watched it until last year. And while I was watching, it really got me thinking that the Haisla hybrid orthography is in itself a code. So if you learn how it works, then you break the code. If you learn the rules to the orthography, that goes a long way in being able to understand how it all works. So once you learn how the orthography works, you break the code. And breaking the code basically comes down to things like associating the sounds with the symbols. So I've talked a little bit about the orthography and what makes up the orthography. So if I were to describe it to someone who was not familiar with it, I would say the Haisla hybrid orthography has regular letters with modifiers. And that's basically how it works. Like you have a regular C. When you put an apostrophe on top of that C, it becomes what we call an ejective C. So it changes the sound, changes the behavior of that sound, the addition of the apostrophe. That's one example. If you think about some of the other symbols, like there's a regular G, and then there's a G bar, which is the same as the regular G, but it has a line over top of it. So that is what we call a uvularized G. So if you think about the inside of your mouth, if you go from like the front to the back, you have your lips here at the front, you have your teeth, you have your tongue, there's the roof of your mouth, where in the middle of the roof of your mouth is the palate. That's the hard palate. And then a little bit further back is the soft palate, which is also called the velum. And then towards the back of the velum, you have a little piece of skin that hangs down. That's called the uvula. So when you pronounce those uvularized consonants, there's two of them. There's a G bar and an X bar. So those are some of the deeper sounds. So a G bar sounds like huh, huh, huh. It's kind of a harder G sound coming from further back where your uvula is. And an X bar sounds like ha, ha. So that's really how the orthography works. You can start learning the regular letters, and then you learn how to modify them. With the modifying symbols are called diacritics. And it's not really that important to know all the terminology. It's more important to know how it all works. So you don't have to worry if you don't remember that it's called a uvularized X. Just think of it as like a deeper X or a, kind of a guttural X, something like that. So that's basically what the hybrid orthography is. It's a set of regular letters that are based on the English alphabet, but you can modify each of those letters and change the sound of them and change the behavior. So once you get used to the hybrid orthography, your reading ability and your pronunciation will improve like a lot. So that's the benefit of having a standard writing system, is there's that accuracy that's built into it. And it does take training, it does take time, it does take work to learn all that. But if you kind of think of the hybrid orthography as a code, and when you're learning it, you're breaking that code, I think that's going to help in your overall learning journey. So that was what I wanted to talk about in terms of code breaking. There's also, I've done a little bit of studying about codes. I do a little bit of computer coding myself, like website building with HTML. I've done little bits of coding here and there. There's language programs that I've been working with that have their own coding for making dictionaries, and I've done a little bit of that, so I'm kind of experienced, but I'm not an expert in any way on computer coding. But I've also looked into like written codes, and you can go back to the time of Caesar in Rome. He would pass along messages in what was called the Caesar shift. So it would be a series of letters, and there would be a way of deciphering it that only his officers would know. And basically, it would be like if you saw a letter T, then you go back 3 spaces in the alphabet, and that's the actual letter that it represents. So I can't remember actually if you're going back or going forward 3 spaces. It's something like that. So it's relatively simple. Like once you realize how it works, then it's easy to follow. So that kind of got me thinking along the lines of the hybrid orthography being a code. The next thing that I wanted to talk about, the next key, is descriptions. So this, I think, is very important to know before you start learning the Haisla language. And it has to do with the Haisla words themselves. So we have a tendency to use Haisla words in isolation. The dictionaries share words in isolation. But the way the language works is like Haisla words are not really meant to be used by themselves. They're essentially descriptions. So what happens is that when you go to create a sentence, most of those isolated words will change in some way when you put them into a sentence. So I mentioned before that when it comes to Haisla words, there's some assembly required. So this means adding context. So Haisla words, since they're mostly descriptions, they're lacking context. So how do you add context to those words? You do it by adding suffixes. So suffixes are basically like word endings, and also helping words. So when you add those to full words, those words will change in some way because of the way that word structure and sentence structure works in Haisla. So it's very different from English. If you think about English, when you're speaking or writing, English sentences are mostly made up of fully developed words that are independent of each other, and you're taking those full words and you're kind of stringing them together in a certain order. Most of those words will not really change. There might be variations of it, like is or was or are or something like that. But in general, those words are fully formed, and most of them are not going to change when you put them in an English sentence. It's very different from Haisla. Most words will change when you put them into a sentence because of the way the Haisla language works, because of the way word structure works, because of the way sentence structure works. It's very different from English. So I've talked a little bit about word structure and the fact that Haisla words are made up of what we call root words. So a root word is a small word that has its own meaning, but it can't really be used on its own. So it has to have a suffix added to it. And there are changes that tend to happen. There's 3 basic types of suffixes in Haisla. So the changes will happen according to what kind of suffix you're adding to a word. But when you add a suffix to a root word, you're changing the overall meaning of that word. And that's basically how word structure works in the Haisla language. And something else to keep in mind is that there are factors that you need to consider when you're constructing Haisla sentences, things that you don't really need to think about in English. So things like time is very important. The Haisla language is very time sensitive. It's also location specific. So adding those details will give you a better idea of what the person's talking about, what you're trying to tell the other person that you're talking to. Another one is possession. Usually possession will be shown by adding a specific suffix to a word. You can use a helping word that actually goes in front of a word, but most of the time you're adding a suffix to the end of a word to show possession. A lot of the suffixes will actually talk about possession and location, which I think is one of the unique features of the language. So these are all factors that you don't really have to think about when you're speaking in English. So these are considerations when you are creating sentences in Haisla. So that's one of the biggest differences between English and Kumksiwa, also known as English. So I think this is a very important point to keep in mind before you start learning Haisla, is thinking of full words as not really being full words. You have to, once you use it in a sentence, there's changes that will happen to that word. Another thing that I want to talk about is shortcuts. So this kind of goes back to what I was talking about before with patience. So there are no shortcuts to learning Haisla. So in today's day and age, people have a tendency to want to kind of rush through things and learn things as quickly as possible. That is not really going to benefit you when learning Haisla or any language for that matter. So you really need to put the time into it and the work into it. So people might wonder how I've gotten to where I am in my learning journey. That's how. I didn't just get here like overnight. Like I've put a lot of time and a lot of work into learning how the language works. So taking shortcuts is a natural tendency that people might want to try and incorporate into learning a language, but you might have short-term benefits to doing that, but not long-term. So again, this goes back to the importance of having patience and learning in stages. So don't try and jump right into the language and learn everything all at once. What I talked about before was starting with the sounds, learning how the sounds work in isolation, learn how they work together. And then once you get a handle on that, then you can start looking at word structure. And once you get a handle on that, get a better understanding, then you'll be better prepared to start learning about sentence structure. So learning in stages is really going to be beneficial as you start to learn the language. And people might get a little bit intimidated if they start to realize that it's going to be a lot of time and a lot of work. But the last point here that I wanted to talk about is that thorough training may take longer and it may require more effort, but it will pay off in the long run. So I think that's very important to keep in mind, is again, going back to what I was saying about patience and keeping in mind that it's all leading somewhere. It's all going and building up to something bigger. All those smaller parts that you're learning, eventually you're going to be able to put them together, and then you'll have a much better understanding as you go along in your learning journey. So those are the additions that I wanted to make to the presentation that I started last week with the keys to learning Haisla. So I'll turn off I'll stop sharing my screen here. And yeah, I'll open it up to any questions or any comments that people might have.
Maybe if I could make a quick request. I'm not too sure how feasible it is for you to open up your programs and do one word of maybe somebody's choosing, and just show them what you developed with your tool, a linguistic analysis of a word. And I know when you brought it up in the past, you talked about doing that. You had one word there. What I'm interested in today is when you came by and you took that song that I was writing. I'm kind of embarrassed about it, the original one now. But I knew, like I told you, something's wrong with it. I don't know what's wrong with it. And it totally just flipped my mind. I could have been using the suffixes for that. So I think for them, being able to see you do that would be greatly beneficial. And then show them how you guess. Like, because after you helped rearrange my song, and you took off on Sunday, I was like, he has to be way closer to fluent than he even thinks. Because if he's able to do that, he's like so close. And look at what I was able to do with your help. I sent you the recording of that song, and that was a whole new level of spirituality in that. I was lucky enough, Coral called me when I felt it after rereading it and stuff like that. And then from the first demo of the song to the second one, I felt it wasn't enough feeling for me. And then I just went through it, and Coral called me and I showed her. Lucky enough, I recorded that one. And yeah, thank you for all your help on that. But I really think that showing them your in depth of that thing and how you were able to crack your coding like that, I think would be very beneficial for them to see that. Just because it's been mentioned about 3 times now, and that's, I think, honestly, in the language and the learning that I've done from you, that's my favorite thing to witness, because you could see how in depth the language is and how it looks so big and then it makes it smaller again.
Yeah, that's something that I could definitely do in future presentations, is taking people through that process of the root word analysis that I developed, so people can get a better idea of how I do that, and also how I have benefited from developing that process.
So how's your school going for, is it opening any, is it making you have any more connections into the language, like a lot more deeply, or?
I'm getting more ideas on how we can organize a new dictionary, because if you like, we've all looked in dictionaries like English dictionaries, and the Heisler dictionaries kind of follow the same format where they're listed alphabetically. In the Heisler language, it's a little bit different because we have special symbols, but that's the way that, like, Lincoln and Rath developed or organized their dictionary, was through their orthography, going off, following basically the equivalent of the English alphabet. But I'm thinking of going even beyond that. Like, I'm thinking maybe of different, like different variations, like different copies of the dictionary that we could have. Like, we could have one like that, where it's more conventional organization of the words. But I'm also thinking, like, what if we had a dictionary that it's based more on like categories, like words about fishing, words about hunting, about plants, trees, berries, things like that. So instead of looking through a dictionary, going through everything alphabetically, all the words alphabetically, I think it might be helpful just to, okay, I'm looking for a name of a plant, so I can go to this section of this dictionary. All the plants are listed here. I think that might be another way of organizing a dictionary that would be beneficial. And I'm getting different ideas of even building dictionaries, because as I'm going through the course, I'm learning more about how other dictionaries would normally be developed, like right from the start, the work that would go on from the start of it, from the start of the dictionary project. So those are things that I'm thinking that we could try and incorporate as well. And yeah, it's been really interesting finding out a lot of the science that actually goes into creating a dictionary, things that I wasn't aware of before, and learning a little bit more about the linguistic field as I go along too, because I don't have any formal training in linguistics, so it's been kind of an eye-opening experience, kind of jumping in. So it's not an undergrad course; it's actually a graduate course that I'm taking. So I'm kind of jumping head first into it without like the formal training that somebody would normally have going into a course like this. But it's yeah, that part is really challenging, and trying to learn the terminology, all of that is really challenging. But I'm definitely learning a lot as I'm going along. So it's been really interesting, really eye-opening.
I really like your concept of the restructuring that dictionary, because I think my biggest breakthrough, it would have had to have been my first biggest breakthrough, was Kwaklo. And the plants have a suffix of AS at the end. And I was looking at all of the plants, and I was so confused by that one, because I was like, it doesn't follow the same structure. So then I brought it to you. Then you went and brought it to your linguistic analysis, and we actually found the real word for cedar, red cedar, which was dunyas, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were able to correct that. And my theory behind that was someone picked up a piece of chopped wood and was asking for what is the word for cedar, and that kind of just went into the dictionary. So as I brought that to you, I think that was one of my biggest breakthroughs at that time, for sure. And I was pretty proud of myself. So me with that breakthrough, imagine having all the plants in that one, where people could make that connection and see the suffixes working under that hat, I guess I could say. And I think the connections would fire off a lot quicker, instead of having to go to this section for this plant and then go through and this section for that plant. It kind of forces them right away to be able to absorb what was always being referred to as the coding behind it. So I support that idea quite a bit, because I could see how you would rapidly learn. So, and I know your thing is exposure. When you're exposing them proper, like your new ideas, so that's going to be amazing, because now they're not going to have to go here, there, or anywhere else. It's right there, and you're going to be able to expose them to all different types of suffixes right off the bat. So that's a really good idea.
Yeah, and this way of learning has also been really beneficial to me in terms of the plants, because I learned that there's actually different names for different parts of the plant. So like huquum is the wild rice roots, like the rice grains themselves that grow on the ground. Then huquas is the plant itself above ground. And that's a pretty common theme with the plants, is there's like with the berries, there's one word for the berries, and there's another word for the actual bush or tree that they grow on. So that's something that's been has been really helpful in my learning, and I'm hoping that it's going to be helpful to other people too, to understand that there is a difference in the terminology for, like, we have a word for the plant and also for the different parts of the plant, and things like that.
What was that other one? Huquas pulcha?
I'm trying to think. Yeah, that would be like the wild rice flower or wild rice bloom.
Yeah, that's cool. That one really blew my mind because I was thinking kibut, and I knew the whole plant as that. So when you're able to bring me, I think it's a K-Pass,
Yeah, keep
um,
us.
K-Pass. I was really blown away because my whole life I've only ever known, I was calling the whole plant the berry. So when you're making these little things, and then even as he corrects me here, I've specifically asked Ab to make sure that the pronunciation is proper when he catches me, because it took me a long time to get for me that sound. When somebody trained me in one word, it was with the old orthography, and it had they must have um we've taken away the LH and we've put the tilde L in there specifically for purposes like this. It's taken me 3 years, I believe 3 years, to be able to break this habit, and sometimes it goes back again. So I'm a big advocate for proper pronunciation and myself being corrected as soon as possible, so that I don't have to take another couple years of breaking a bad habit from being taught proper or accidentally teaching myself improper. Does anybody else have any questions for Ab?
Not so much questions, but just like what you just said, Dustin, made me think of the whole process I feel like I'm in at this time of unlearning everything that I thought I knew was Heisla. Because I've I've done as best as I can to learn as much Heisla as I can from different elders over the years. Maybe 7 or 8 different elders. So I there's about 200 words or so that I've learned. And now I feel like I have to start over, and it's a very big and daunting and intense journey, and I'm very grateful. And I am actually realizing that I'm starting to forget words I thought I knew. I'm like, oh, okay, that's just making room for like the correct one.
Mhm.
And just the whole journey that I was on to learn those words. I remember with my Barbara Crosby, if I asked him point blank, how do you say, he would get really nervous and he'd kind of like freeze up and he'd get really overwhelmed. And I felt really bad. I felt really bad for putting him on the spot like that. And so I realized I needed to create like a environment that would inspire him to speak Heisla. And then he'd get on a roll and he'd just start telling me words, and I did my best to write them down. And what I would do is I would bring him a plant. I would bring him like any plant. And he'd be like, oh, this plant. And he'd tell me all these stories and remind him of this and remind him of that. And then he'd start to be like, oh yeah, this is our word for this and this is our word for that. And so that's how I learned. And it just really made me realize like the bigness of the wounding that our people have around the language, and how it's like I shared in my poem the other week, like it's like a relative that we're caring about and helping um, in our joint healing journey. And so whenever I would go to the language group in Vancouver, I'd come away with like such a tender feeling in my heart of like, wow, this is kind of emotional. This is kind of emotional to come and like sit with this relative, our language, and like do our best and feel our feels. And I was so excited and like curious, and I had all these questions, and yeah, so that's what I was inspired to share at this time. And I would wonder if like a lot of different Heislas are in that journey of relearning or unlearning or correcting, or and just how much big emotion is around it, because it's our language has been through a lot.
When I came into my previous job position, and we all know, joking, we all thought it was Galen, and it's actually QW, Glen, and things like that. When they taught you,
Glenn.
when they taught you, it was close enough, and they say, yeah, because you are trying. Without having a teacher like Ab, they'll let you keep trying and trying to the best without really understanding how to teach it because they don't understand the orthography. What they do is second nature, and they can't differentiate from a ejected rounded Q and rounded G. So I think that's the benefit that we get with this orthography, because it'll always be. So everything that you've learned too is not, it's not taking away anything. You just have to associate it with the right one now. You already know it. Let's just get that little correction in there. And that's when we're gentle on ourselves. And that's why I tell Ab specifically on these things, if I'm making a mistake, to correct me, and I want everybody to witness it, because it's okay to make mistakes. What is not okay is not trying. When we're not trying, we're given into that feeling that we're not good enough, and we all are good enough. It's going to take a gentle walk.
And
Go ahead.
I see too, Justin, that you've been on a healing journey. Like you're journeying with songs and your artwork and the things that you make and your relationship to plants. And so that indigenous spirit in you, that even though the language has been through a lot, it's kind of like you've built up your medicine so that when you are corrected, it's not such a blow. Like you
Yeah.
have strength, you found your footing in a certain way. And if language is someone's entry point into reconnecting with their indigenous journey, their healing, and if they don't have those big medicines with them, then it's just it's so hard on the heart, because there's so much shame, there's so much
Mhm.
pressure, and all these things, and I'm probably just like stating the obvious in a lot of ways, but I really honor the strength that it takes for any language learners to step into that place in helping our relative language.
One thing that we've stated is we'll never laugh at you. We might laugh with you if you think it's hilarious and you've accidentally said something and you induced laughter. We'll laugh with you. But as teachers, it would be irresponsible for us to laugh at our students. It doesn't matter if they made a little mistake, a big mistake, whatever mistake they make can be corrected. What is not okay too is not correcting them and allowing them to continue to go forward unsupported. So we all know how that felt when we were trying to pronounce them, and maybe these people weren't even thinking and they just thought it was funny and they laughed at us for pronouncing. Now, how encouraging is that for us going forward? What is that going to do in our psyche, our heart, and our DNA cellular memory? It really hurts, because, and you don't realize at the time until after, but something wrong had happened in that place. Then through self-reflection, probably, we realized that it was unfair that we got laughed at for that. And I think that comes from a lot of residential school residual energy, and a lot of people still not understanding. We had a lot of people. I had one person that was just adamant that they're not residential school effect, that they have no effect from residential school. They're happy and fine. And I said I could prove it to you in a matter of seconds. And they sat back and they're like, okay, how? I was like, tell me about your week in our language. And you could see it affected their throat right away. I could just see it affected that. And they looked over, and I was like, that's how we all are. And what we don't realize now, and I had to ask the individual if they're okay, and basically offering my support with that sudden realization. Because when you come into those sudden realizations of that, you might feel lonely, scared, and then unworthy because you never put that effort into it. A lot of us never had the option because there's never been a standardized rating system. And when there was standardized rating systems, we're missing a teacher for those standardized rating systems to help us out. I believe Emin Bach did a really great job throughout collaborating through all these other people. And then we were lucky enough to have a Heisla creating one way of saying everything. We're so lucky. So now the argument's gone. of these other people are coming in and they're making our language like this, they're making our language like that. And I was like, well, now we have a Heisla doing the work. You know, if I was still in my job position, we'd be advancing really far. If Megan was still in her job position and Teresa, we had the dream team there for quite a while. So, but look at what we're doing now. Now we're doing it without any limitations, and that's really good. This to me is a big medicine. You can see my eyes this week; they're not so bad. Like, I, to be honest with you guys, I had a lot of PTSD that coming into these things, and everything that was taken from me in an unjust way. That's the truth, in an unjust way. I've been able to start healing with that throughout having my best friends, my sisters. I don't even know why I'm referring to everyone as friends. It's all brothers and sisters here, and we all have this special thing behind us that's helped guiding this. You see, we're sitting here and it's 46 minutes in, and it seems like we just turned this on. That's how healing this is. When time is flying like that, you know, we're doing it right. And the only question that is wrong is when you don't ask. And if you want extra support on a lot of things too, like you could ask Ab. He has a lot of things that he'd be able to walk you through in a matter of seconds, just to build up um, your reflexes. Because when the coding's coming in, I don't see ejected anything when I'm reading. It's just like boom, 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 boom. And that backwards to forwards helps. Not only are you, I seen Ab's mom posted something. If you use one word 7 times, you're less likely to forget about that word. Like, you're less likely to not remember it. So remembering it is key when you're learning that. Then I was thinking, wow, when you're going backwards to forwards, that's a tool. It's doing 2 things. You're embedding it. You're making your cognitive thinking work in your reactions that you're developing. So for me, it's just like martial arts training, but for your mind, meditation, mind strengthening, reaction, reflex, all of these things that we're sharpening up together is amazing. And we might get emotional because our DNA has been waiting for this. It's been, our ancestors have been waiting for someone like Ab. If anyone thinks that I'm good at Heisla, like I can only imagine where he's truly at. And I admit I am really, really good at what I do because I've, like Ab, put in that work. Those handwritten books that I have, it takes time. Who else wants to go do all that stuff? I don't know anyone that wants to handwrite out all our stories, but I did because I don't know, I felt it. I needed to know things. I needed to know what the connector sentences are. I needed to know why they were changing, how this one word could actually mean 4 to 5 different words in English, depending on what's surrounding it. So when you're finding those codings, it gets a lot easier. And now I'm reading Kala, and I'm guessing what it is. So I won't look at the English and I'll look down and I'm like, oh, I only missed 2 words. So my advancement's getting pretty far as well. And I read every couple nights just to try get the sentences built. When you're speaking our language, there's so many different suffixes that I'm unfamiliar with. But my muscle memory, my mind memory, my tongue memory, my throat, all of those different things are just firing off in synapse now. So imagine what I'm going to be able to say to you guys in 5 years. Imagine in 2 years what Ab's going to be able to say to us. Let's say by the end of this year, what is he going to be able to say? So I was going through the dictionaries every night before bed, and I was reading as much as I could before my eyes got really tired. And what I was trying to do was specifically overload my brain because I could take in, as a guitar player, a heck of a lot of information. So when I woke up, my brain was refreshed, and it was things were sticking in there now. randomly I'd be walking places and have a Heisel word pop up in my mind, and I didn't even know what it meant. I'd have to go back and go look it up, and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Like, was that an ancestor trying to tell me, or so then you have that spiritual realm too. Imagine how many of our ancestors are right beside us here right now, being like, look at what they're doing, this is fascinating. Imagine what my Baba thinks. Imagine what his brother Wahed and my Baba thinks. It's amazing. How do you think your Baba Crosby feels, or our Baba Crosby? Just yours and I's, not Coral's. But imagine how they feel on the other side when they're watching you tell your story that you just did, and that's your Nuyem. That's your story, and it's a great one. The reason I really like these is because we're taking away the intimidation for people jumping into it, thinking it's something that it's not. It's not university level stuff. This is all basic stuff. And 80% of it already. You just don't know the Heisel word for it yet. Once you're able to make a relation between the English word, the equivalent English word or closest to, then you'll be able to start building up a bigger repertoire. So for me, even when I got rusty, it took me about 2 days of reading, and I feel like I'm right back up. And then when you overload your brain so much, that's when you need to take time for yourself and take a break. Like Ab said, don't try push so hard. Slow. That's my biggest hint to everybody, is slow, sound it out. My adrenaline gets going sometimes, and I try get it all done, and I have to slow myself. And I think my adrenaline comes mainly from fear of making a mistake still, like and then just following my heart's pace, I guess, because your adrenaline comes up because you're starting to speak it again. And that's where I think our DNA is healing, because it was 2 generations, maybe 3, that they were made not to speak the language. Then when you heard a lot of these people speaking, trying to get some of that, they would be quiet and switch to English, because they didn't ever want what happened to them to happen to us. They were protecting us. So nowadays, it's really hard to go back and to get a lot of that ancient stuff back. But what's amazing is I believe Ab is going to be able to bring back part of the most purest part of our language, just because his understanding. And he's at a place where he could build his own words. So that to me is phenomenal. If you're able to build a word for something that doesn't exist yet and be able to run it through and make it work. I think the last word I watched him, or I witnessed, was fire extinguisher, if I'm correct. And
Fire hall.
Fire hall, yeah. So he was able to make a word, and it functions. So when they're talking about our language evolving, it really did when contact happened, because we didn't have any of that stuff. When they're talking about the kunk siwa, the way it was explained to me, we were burning for my grandfather Dan, and Edith and B were sitting there, and I was questioning them. I'm always questioning my elders, because they hold all the knowledge that you've been craving. And they were talking, going back and forth, and they're like, when you take a rock and you toss it in a pond, it goes Kung. And I was like, cool. And I guess that sound is associated with that. But they said the siwa is when you see the white caps come up, the white caps crash, and then the whiteness disappears into the water. Or the seagulls that go behind the wave and their white heads come up and down. So there's a process going on there where something white is going under. And imagine when I asked my grandma, what was it like to see the first siwas? And she said they thought they were sick. They thought they were the dead that had risen, and like ghosts, and they were different. They were white with blue eyes, and the scouts came in alerting people that the dead were walking and stuff like that. So could you imagine? This has only happened in our territory in 100 and something years. We're some of the last people to be contacted. And as they came from the east to the west, they have hundreds of years of taking out the Indian out of the Indian coming from that side of Canada, and they perfected it by the time they came here. Everything that we're getting back now has been pre-programmed into our people to not teach all of this stuff, because the faster they can get us to assimilate, then we're just the same as them, and they've taken us away. And it's key, our language, because when you look at the Wahiwis, all of our language that we know comes from this chunk of land that the creator put us here. All of our language comes from what we've observed from Mother Nature. And like Ab's able to create words now, imagine when the first human and them were put into the Kitlo. Then when the population grew and grew, imagine how that what's referred to as that Awikila language developed from there. And now thinking, since they separated us, what if Rivers Inlet and the Kitlope are so closely more related? Because there's one trail that goes that I know nothing about. No one said anything about the trail. They just call it a heritage trail now, but I'm pretty sure it was a grease trail between the two communities. So it's really interesting. And theirs is, when I listen to the language, it really sounds more like what my Baba used to speak. So I could look back and see the differences of the speak between my Baba and my Gran, which is really interesting. And then to think if I could actually be hypnotized and get that activated in my brain now, man, I would be so far advanced. And the ones that were raised by their grandparents are so lucky and special for having such a pure language embedded into their subconscious that we don't even know we could access to this day. We're lucky to have a lot of people now that are really studying it. Like, then imagine Mama O'Donna never taught at the Heisler School. That'd be a great disadvantage. Imagine she never taught Troy the prayer from Teresa's story. Imagine Troy never went home and prayed in Heisler and made his family cry, because none of them knew why they were crying, for one. As they supported each other, they found out that it is deep-rooted intergenerational trauma that has done this, because we don't know our language. None of us would be here right now. I wouldn't have an interactive map. Ab wouldn't be advanced as far as he was. Megan wouldn't be doing what she was doing, because Teresa pushed for all of this stuff. That's why I almost cried when I gave her that recognition on that one episode, is because she created everything and never got to do what she loved. And the whole thing she created was so she could learn the language. And she was running in 5 directions, facilitating cultural awareness, which was really hard on our souls. Having to endure your traumas when you're educating non-Aboriginals about what we've been through. We're reenacting all of our traumas that we're barely healed from. So that was really hard on a lot of people. And again, I feel really let down that Teresa never got her real shot to sit and study the language, like the whole reason she created the department that she did. So I believe a lot of people are grateful for this. You cannot not be, because look at all the stuff. I'm looking up at the calendar that App had brought me, and we wouldn't have that either. We wouldn't even have that concept. Like, I personally wouldn't. Then where would I be in my own personal healing? Because I will never heal if I cannot speak. And I had to go retract my original statement at my interview. I didn't think I would ever be fluent. There's not one hint that gave me I would, because we never had a standardized orthography. One elder to one elder pronounces it different through personal accent, the way they were taught. And if you spell it the way it sounds, we're losing. We're just losing so much articulation, pronunciation, and with what is being developed with this hybrid orthography, it's a guaranteed win. It's done forever. And with the teaching tools AB has developed, and the way AB teaches is the most phenomenal thing, because I am my own teacher. Only when I get ahead of myself do I have to come to AB now and make sure that I'm not teaching myself wrong. And I think I'm really gentle in that, because for me, when I'm making mistakes, I'm learning way more. I'm learning way faster than if I was to keep the mistake to myself. And now I could teach other people through my mistakes. And that's what makes me a good teacher in my way. And what makes Ab a good teacher is his ability to teach you how to teach yourself. And you could see the effect of it already going through everybody here. People are starting to realize that they could do this themselves. And then when you need help, come ask Ab. And the reason he developed it like this is because, well, you look at what Megan's doing. She's going in and teaching language classes to programming. So teaching people to teach themselves is, then we pass it on to the next person. They pass it on. Come the next generation, we're really well off, you know. Wait till we're 5 years down the road, and what do these look like? We might be giving actual full sentence structures, breakdowns, and what it means to advanced people. So being gentle with yourself and getting those couple words pronounced proper and building that habit, that's the key to me. I think that, and consistency. If people are putting out teaching tools that aren't consistent, what kind of damage does this do? And what is that called? Misrepresentation of our language. You're allowing it to happen by willingly and knowing that that is not correct spelling. So myself, if I could get that habit with that, when I use the word, I don't even want to speak it right now, because that's how deeply that one has damaged me. And it's taken me a while, like 3 years of trying to build that habit back. It's like you learn something, that's why you're supposed to learn it right the first time. And even with a gooey clap, right? Everyone says Gowa clap. How do you pronounce it, Ab? Was that correct?
Giwatla.
Giwatla. So yeah, and I was pronouncing that one all wrong my whole life. So, well, it's 8:03 now. I think we're good for about a 10-minute break.
I did want to add a little bit more
Okay.
to what
Yeah,
you
go
were
ahead.
saying before about the linguists that have worked with our language and the perception that people might have about the work that they were doing. Well, before I get into that, I wanted to share something that I witnessed in a presentation that I made, where one of the people in the room kind of voiced their opposition to the idea of like a standard writing system. And they basically described linguistics as being a science. And I didn't really get a chance to respond. And I didn't really think too much about it at first, but afterwards I started to think more about it. And I would say that it is correct to say that linguistics is a science, but I would say it's also an art form. Because if you look at how Hein Vink developed his writing systems, he was the first one to develop like a standard writing system for our language. And he could have chosen any number of symbols. There's so many different representations. He developed something he called the Dictionary of Heisler, and in the introduction, he actually talked about the symbols that he chose, and he talked about the fact that there's any number of symbols he could have chosen, and he showed some that I believe he made up and that didn't exist, just to kind of put that point across that like it's the symbols were chosen for a reason. And it just has to do with like the English alphabet, what's already built into the English alphabet, and going outside of that to represent our sounds in our language that are unique to our language. So I would say that what Hein Vink was practicing there was science, but it was also art, because he made choices. That's what art is making choices. If you're not an artist, then you wouldn't understand that. But I've been an artist most of my life, and that's what I'm doing the majority of the time, is I'm making choices, I'm making decisions. It's creative problem solving. Basically, that's what art really is. And that's what Hein Vink was practicing when he developed his first orthography, and the linguists that have come afterwards have also done that as well. So the later linguists had the benefit of looking back at Hein Vink's work and modifying parts of it and developing their own orthographies based on that. So again, that's creative. Those are creative decisions that are going into it. So again, it's an art form. So the knowledge is scientific, like the knowledge of linguistics is scientific, but how it's applied is a creative process. So I think people might get the wrong idea about what linguistics is and what linguists do. So one thing that I've been learning in my course is that there's two basic approaches to linguistics. There's the prescriptive approach, which means like you're saying a language should be represented a certain way or should be spoken a certain way. And there's descriptive, where you're just recording the language and nothing else. That's what the linguists have done with the Haida language. They didn't invent the rules around how the language works. They discovered them, they recorded them, and figured out how it all works. So they didn't take a prescriptive approach where they're trying to tell us how we should be speaking our language or how it should be represented. It's just they discovered how it works. They found ways to describe how the language works, how the sounds work, and then developed the most accurate spelling systems that they felt they could develop at that point. So I just wanted to add that just to shed a little bit more light. And those are things that I'm learning in my university course as to like the background behind the kind of work that goes into studying language.
That's really cool. And you and I have came across a couple of those things too on our own study. I can't remember off the top of my head, but when we would get together and just do things and just start Q&Aing basically ourselves. I remember us coming across a couple things that I can't remember what it was right now, but it's really interesting when you start having theory, when you're able to talk theory about our language. You know you're getting to a really good place. And yeah, it's been quite a journey, and it's been really fun. I find it really, really fun. And when I start going, I get addicted to it. And that's when it's dangerous, because I try to push myself till I sleep almost, right?
I have I guess a question. I don't know if it's a question. I learned from a Squamish Nation member that the eating of salmon changed our brain chemistry in such a way that influenced the speaking of our language to be able to make the sounds that it does. Has anyone here heard of that before? About eating fish changes the brain?
No, I know it has all the proper proteins to make brain function. Like they have essential oils for your brain. It reminds me of the monkey and the mushroom. When the monkeys were just an instinctual animal, they would go and forage, and they weren't grabbing things choice, like repetitively. I know I like this, so I'm going to go harvest it. They were basically doing Darwinism and being like, oh, I wonder if this tastes good. And they just knew it as food. Their animal, what the Kumsiwa refers to as an animal mind, you know, they don't think they have feelings and stuff like that. But before it actually had, they say that these monkeys had consciousness within themselves. They found a patch of magic mushrooms. And that patch of magic mushrooms affected their brain chemistry really, really, really fast to when they started looking at their hands, being like, and then they have the conscious thought of being alive. And that's how fast this theory of brain evolution worked in this monkey study that I watched through the magic mushrooms. And you take in that magic mushrooms, there's chemical reactions throughout your brain that are just phenomenal. So we used to do mushroom ceremonies, like to be able to have those visions. If you go down to Mexico, the medicine men take the people that are 5 years old and induce mushrooms into them. So they always remember there's more to this world. So I remember what it was like taking them at 13 and 12. I couldn't imagine taking them at 5 years old. And but the medicine men down there are trained for this, right? That's something that has been lost. And one of the coolest things I saw that medicine man doing is there was one kid that came up, wanted to do it, was so anxious, and you could see it just in his chest. And he said, "No, you're not ready. Come back again when you're ready." And the kid wanted to know when he'll be ready. And he said, "When you're not feeling like that." Imagine having a bad trip on mushrooms at 5 years old. And they do this for every one of their children in that region there. So I could imagine how that affects brain function and stuff. And then looking at every piece of our existence and our diet that we used to eat. What was it? Now imagine what the ulican grease did for us. As you talk salmon, we're more specific to Tlati people. All right. So imagine how our brains might work different to other nations that don't have that. And then what was their equivalent of getting these fats in?
Because I think of
So,
like the Gaelic languages, which is like Ireland, Scotland, and they have the same kind of guttural sort of throat intonations as we do, and they're also an oceanside, very like big shoreline, like islands, like lots of islands within their shorelines. People who ate a lot of seafood, and their language turned out to sound the same as ours. So I kind of wonder about that kinship tie that we have
yeah, that's interesting.
with
I'm
like
actually going to go
what
look
we
into
take
it.
in, and then like out east, like Cree Blackfoot is like sounds so different than ours, and they're like, you know, buffalo people, and like they very seldom have fish, but they're very more like meat. And then up north, you know, maybe it would be like seal meat, and like how would that affect? And it's just very fascinating to me to consider.
Hmm. Have you tried a lot of, have you tried seal fat?
When I was little,
Yeah, did you like it?
yeah,
I like the I like it in little bits when it's pre-smoked, just a little tiny bit first, and then with smoked salmon, and then cut the quilt and then eat that little piece of fat and then get some salmon in my mouth. It was more in my head. I don't know why. I was like, but then I love pork fat, so why wouldn't I like that? When it's singed, it's even better, like burnt, and then it's got that crisp on it. It's actually tastes really nice.
sounds good.
Is there any more? I really don't like closing it off if there is more questions, because you never think, like, even as one person asks a question, I think it stimulates more. So I don't want to close the door to this before our break. And then after, since we've been doing this for I think a month and a half now. What is this, our 7th week doing this?
6th.
6th week. Yeah, so if there's we just do open Q&A. There's has to be so much more I missed, and there has to be more questions just in the medicine alone, because I did not touch on treatments and stuff like that. I know you were saying about more specific to having a Q&A around that. And if I'd even like to see what my sister's opinion is on that compared to mine. And that'll show you same family, brother and sister. And if she's been out of our discussions, what is her natural reaction?
Mm-hmm.
So you already know my medicine for that and what I said. And I would just like to show everyone how the individual is going to affect the medicines as well. And the teachings where she got hers. And maybe if it was from my Baba, he probably taught her for a specific reason. My Baba walked with both polarities, like he was what they called twin spirited, and it's not nothing to do with sexuality. It has to do with being comfortable doing a man and woman's job. He was just okay doing that. He would go do all the hard work, and then you would see him in the kitchen doing dishes. There was no differentiated jobs like that to him. He would never do something and be like, this is a woman's job. He was never like that, eh? So having such a gentle teacher like that was really good. And for our people, our Gwelu, our women were the backbone of our community. They were what held us together. They were so honored. Like we were talking earlier, what is the most powerful thing in this waking world that we could see? It's women. Outside the creator, women are the only people that could bring life in. That is phenomenal. And we need to get back to respecting all of that kind of stuff and reteaching it so people understand. That's so, so special. That's why we had specific protocols back in the day prior to contact. There was a lot of protocols that have been gone now. Eh? So we might have to look at neighboring nations to be able to see what theirs were. And when we're looking at Gwelut, people that are the same as us, our true Gwelut would be Heithzau, Numgis. Those are people like us, the closest ones to being like us. And Ab explained it in the last episode on why, because our language, our waking world, you brought it up, our diet, we're all salmon people up and down this coast. And what ties us together is our diet. They're also Tlati people of Greece. So
They
yeah, it
call it
opens,
Trina.
yeah, Tlina. And what we know as Tlina is sedimentary kind of we in the Kitlope do our purifying rocks, and we get the sediments out when we put those big giant rocks down in there that are big glowing red, and you see the flame come out. That's all the impurities. So that's how we change Tlina to Tlati. So I think we can take a 10-minute break. You guys comfortable with that? Yeah. Okay.
That Trina's really good.
Yeah, well, there's places people in the NAS might not even like our grease, and we might not like theirs, and it changes everywhere. It has to do with regional taste buds, I guess. But we'll take a 10-minute break and come back at 8:30. Wow. So how are you feeling?
How am I feeling? Good.
Feels really nice. Yeah, I really like this discussion today.
Mm-hmm. They're all such big things that are in my heart and on my mind, and it's good to have other like-hearted, like-minded humans to talk about it with.
Yeah,
I
that's really
like,
neat.
I like the part that Ab talked about the language sounding like the ocean. That
Mhm.
really blew me away. That really, because that's something that I had come to conclude within my own mind and my own awareness, throughout my life, just hearing it and speaking it and things, and hearing other languages and what they sound like. And yeah, it was very beautiful and very powerful to hear another Haisla say that our language is like the ocean. I was like, exactly.
Goes like this all the time. And if it's not going like this, you can't go like this and go up, up, up. It always has to flow back up and down. And you'll notice that with the acute accent markers. That's an indication of where it's going up and down, but it's always vibrating like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, getting into the orthography, into the orthography world, I believe is the easiest way to learn it. I didn't realize how much I actually retain off the top of my head until I watch these videos back at points to see, one, if I misrepresented anything, two, if I gave the wrong word by accident, and my mind's firing off synapse so fast, it's easy to make a mistake. Hey, I think the only one mistake I did make, though, is when I was talking about the Grease Trail and the relation to Dan Paul Sr. was with Andy Saiwalis, not Peter Saiwalis. Peter Saiwalis is Andy's boy. So that was the one mistake that I caught myself making.
Mm-hmm.
So what questions did you have written down? You said earlier you had some questions.
Yeah. One during the plant one, kind of at the end of our night, you were just like firing through them, and we spent a good amount of time on like Devil's Club and Oxley um and when you talked about wild celery, I didn't hear through what you shared how we ate it, because mostly you talked about how to look out for its lookalike and the dangers
Yeah.
in that. So I came away being like, wait, what do we do with it?
There's it depends on what level you're at, and I know what level you're at. We're all at that level. You have to peel the outer bark off, basically. So it's hollow on the inside, typically about the tip of the water bottle. That's about the thickness of the castum. Then in the inside there, it'll be hollow. It has a milky substance to it, which is lactoids. But when you grab it, just like guaclam, when you're peeling guaclam, you just have to watch out for those hairs. Once you break it, cut it, whatever you do, you'll be able to go like that and pull that out. And it's that inner stalk that you want to eat. Just like our that's fireweed. The same thing. You peel the outside and you're eating that inner stalk. And then when it gets bigger, and typically nothing is edible on it, there's still one inner membrane on the fireweed.
And do you cook it? Like, do you steam it or anything?
You can cook it any way you want. Yeah. Steam it. Probably once it's clean, chop it up, and then once you do your soups, put it on right at the last. You don't have to cook it so much. I think it would probably just fall apart. But everyone I've seen basically eats it fresh. One funny story is when my Baba had passed, we were out doing the burning. This is the same time I was talking about my two grands, Granny B and Granny Edith. My Granny Edith told her daughter, my Auntie Mag, Virginia, go get me some of that castum over there. She's like, okay. She walks over. She's looking around. It's right in front of her. And I was like, you have no idea what you're looking for, do you? She's like, no.
She thought it was just gonna appear to her.
And that's another testament to imagine she just grabbed it with her hand, right? So I've heard this. I've never tested it. I don't want to test it. I don't want to know what that itch is like or that swelling up is like. But I heard it's only the males that affect you really bad. Then sometimes I've heard other people say, no, it's the female. So there's a big confliction there. And I think it's a little bit of knowledge will do a lot of damage in some points, eh? One thing about the Oaksley, I was doing Meals on Wheels when I worked with the elders, and I would always question them about different plants, different medicines. And June Woods had given me an amazing treatment. I asked her, typically ask, what do you use Oxley for? Is it just for ghost chaser? Do you use it medicine wise? Do you apply it? Do you grind it up? And she was like, no, none of that. But my husband was really hurt one time and his back was so bad. He was in agonizing, agonizing pain. I was like, so what did you do? She was going to tell me anyways, but I was always stimulate the conversation like this. She was like, we dug a hole, we put a whole bunch of rocks in there, and we lit a fire on top of it. And I was like, cool. And then what? She was like, we took the Oaksley, we put it on top of the hot rocks, we buried all the sand, and then he lied on, or we dumped water on it. All that steam came out, put that medicine into his back, and by the time he was done his treatment, he was up and walking around. So without asking questions, you'll never get this. And one tool that I used for this and stimulating people's thought processes was Asina. Or like you said, you brought a plant, which is phenomenal. I would bring the berries from those plants or edible times of the year, pull them out and let a couple of the elders try it. You don't have to ask questions after that. They answer everything you want because they're in the zone. All of a sudden they taste it, their synapse bring them back to those pleasant memories of their little. Then they start laughing. You remember stealing sugar for this? Yeah, we would go and grab sugar and we dip it in the castum and sit there and eat it. Oh, it was our treat. And then when it's casina, the wild currant berries, and I encourage anyone to try this when it's casina season, is take some of that, bring it to an elder. Right when they taste it, their eyes close and they go, this brings me right back to Buttedale. We used to all go to this one river and it's like hanging down like this. So the river, the little creek goes up like that, but the berries would hang down like that. And they said through the light, all you see is like, and they grow like little tiny, tiny grape bundles, hey? So I personally used ancestral food to stimulate the thought process and then question them. So when we made Liedzach, I would do that same thing. Then when we had access to Tlati, I would make frozen berries, like a punch or fruit salad. And then I would put 2 scoops in there and then mix it around. And then I'm allergic to it, so I had to be careful. But they went and ate it. And the same thing, one taste like, there's Tlati in here. And then all of a sudden, all of those memories and stories come out.
It's like
One thing I wish I did was just put a stationary camera there to data mine all that stuff now, because that time is over and done. And I don't see anyone using any of these natural techniques that you and I have developed. Like, that's a natural technique. And you don't think of it as a technique until what you just demonstrated and you exercised with our Baba, but not corals. But through that and seeing the personalities prevail, and they want the conversations just naturally took place, and we would sit there and the problem with it is I would say, how do you say that in our language? And then I would write it down. This constant problem is going to happen until we start using orthographies. The orthographies will never change. I could write many words out, and when I go to read it again, I don't know where the pronunciation's supposed to be. I don't know when it's supposed to be emphasized. I could represent it in 30 different ways and still not be able to reread it myself. Throughout the orthography, I could read it and get the pronunciation. if not the first time, on the second time. I always read it the first time to try get my instinct to see if I'm up to par. Then I take my time and I go backwards to forwards. And sometimes I know I miss that acute accent marker where it's supposed to be tequa instead of tequa, right? And if you're not using that, then you're saying octopus instead of black bear.
Hmm.
So that emphasis at the end and where it's coming from. Now, how do you represent that in English and separate those two?
Mhm.
If you spell it the way it sounds, that's where the difficulty comes in. And I watched Ab take some of the Nanaqua, George Reverend Rayleigh's newsletter. It's all spell it the way it sounds, and my mind was gone. But since he knows the sounds they're trying to make, he was able to bring it up to the hybrid orthography, and I was like, wow, that's impressive. So I take that and I go into songs, and I'm able to capture what a lot of people can't hear. So the difference of that gua and qua is going to be a natural. So anytime anyone teaches you a gua word, you have to really be conscious. Is it that or is it a qua? So that's really going to help in that too. When you're building that fine ear in the long run, then you're going to start being able to transcribe and write it down. As the elders start speaking and you're writing it in front of them, the spirit of our language is there again. They get excited and they can't believe you're doing it. Some of them don't even agree with it, the written language, until they see you doing this. And then they ask you, and as you're explaining to them what it means, what these modifiers are doing, you're going to impress yourself. And then you're like, you come to an epiphany. Holy cow, like I can do this, and I am doing it. And what I'm doing now is transcribing our language. So it starts off small, and don't be afraid to be corrected in a handsome way. You know, respect the teachers that are willing to do that for you, and separate yourself from the ones that are emotionally damaging. You shouldn't have to feel bad for trying. Nobody ever should. And it's hard enough. Myself, I have a speech impediment and a reading impediment, specifically from being laughed at as a kid from reading out loud in school. So I could read really, really fast, but when it comes to reading out loud, I'm like, and I'm stumbling all the time because I remember what it was like being laughed at. And that's how bad one little tiny laugh can be, even if the person is just a funny person and they don't get what's behind all of that laugh, especially when you're trying to be gentle on yourself. I like walking gently. I like teaching gently. And I think my unique skill is being able to bring myself to the height of every generation I speak. So if it's a kid, I get right down with them and I start teaching in that. If it's an elder, I'm right up there at that level with the elders. If they're adults, I'm right there still as an adult teaching whatever generation needs. It's really cool because when you're getting so far into it, like much of us knowledge holders don't even know the knowledge we hold. All of a sudden you're gonna be, my Baba says, my Baba says, my Baba told me this, and before you know it, you're like, holy cow, I actually have all citable firsthand experiences of all of this, and I didn't know that. So like you said, you knew about 200 words, like and you didn't know that you knew it until you wanted to figure out how many you knew. So talk about knowledge holders. Now how many people of our people left walk with spirits?
What do you
I
mean?
walk with spirits. I believe in them completely. And that's when I started thinking about our language. Imagine the spirit of our language coming and watching what we're doing. Why do you think we get special blessings of an eagle calling specifically? And you're wondering, is that for me? Crows, animals being attracted to you. When you walk into a place, a baby probably looks at you and stares. What's really cool about babies is in a matter of seconds, they know if they could trust you just from your aura. So it's a testament to that. Now think of our language again. It has its own spirit, and the spirit's been pushed down into the gutter for a long time. What's building the spirit back up? What's blowing new life into it? It's us doing this one word at a time, supporting each other. And the biggest thing right away, and that I believe it's intergenerational trauma and not decolonizing our minds, is they think everybody still thinks that this is written in English. And when my biggest thing on having the alphabet as A, B, C, D, so A, O, B, Ch, T, D, L, E, and so on and so forth. It's my way of decolonizing your mind from A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And right away, it's not English. It's not English anymore. Look at these. What is that above the C? Ab explained it. It's a modifier because you can't do that in English. There is no modifiers outside of an apostrophe. And then when we get a little bit further and talk about retraction, if you have an X and an I, it's like he. And if you put a bar over the X, and every time I put a bar over any consonant, anything that isn't a vowel, I think of right here. So for X, it'd be like, and that's where the sounds are going to be coming from. But once you put an X over that I changes to an A because the retraction happens. So instead of he, it's going to be hey. And we have that same rule in English. What is it? The I will make this sound except after an E. That E changes the sound of the I, and that's retraction in English. We don't even know the English language truly, like whatsoever. We probably know more about our language than we do English, because when you're looking at a J or a G starts with a J sound. What blows your mind is when you realize a W starts with a D. That's crazy. So how much do we really know about the English dialect? We know enough to get by and do our day-to-day conversing, but we're not experts in that, and you don't need to be. That's what Ab was talking about. It's good that I could explain these rules for you, but when Mother Nature takes over, when the spirit of our language is whispering in your ear to correct you, and you start getting these instincts back, you don't need to know retraction, you don't need to know modifiers, you don't need to know any of that. Everything after is going to be instinctual. And anyone that was able to listen to our AMB, especially our grandparents, the ones that have come before us, that's what AMB is. We're very lucky to get the purity of those sounds still. And like I said, you imagine when they came to take our language from us, they already had pretty close to 250 years of how to do this. And that's why it's so deep and it's so fresh. And a lot of people can't recognize it. When they had taken my job from me, I still talk to my elders. I was actually on all morning talking to one of my elders, showing them all the songs that I've been writing and composing and stuff. And they were telling me what's needed and this and that. And I said, we're doing that, we're doing that, we're doing that. And I was like, geez, we're doing a heck of a lot. Because it's fun for me, blowing life into something. I have those morning songs, and I'm going to be able to transcribe those out. Not one person that I know of sings them still. So the day that comes where I'm taking a rattle and singing for us, what is that going to mean? Especially at a wake. Is it going to make them cry? Is it going to induce healing? Is the spirit of our language going to come out and help heal? We don't know because we haven't done it in how long. It's went to sleep. And I believe when Teresa and Ab had put it on SoundCloud under the Muttle songs, they got chewed out because it's a morning song. It's a morning song. It's just like any other song, except it's for death. And if you want it hidden forever again, this is the problem with it. Hide it from everyone so nobody could ever breathe life back into it. If these individuals that are saying that and they're not upholding responsibility to our ancestral ways, to this song that's supposed to be sung in this way, what happens when there's someone like me that had to get special access just to be able to get that song? That's not right. Someone like me is someone that could breathe life into these because I have the skill to do that. I've done that to 4 songs now. There's 4 songs that I sing that only I sing so far, and people are learning them. I want as many people to. That's why I specifically show people, this is what I'm writing, this is what I'm composing. It's like, learn it, sing it with me. That's what I'm saying without saying that. And I'm trying to do such melodious ones that it speaks to your soul. Like that last song that I had sent you, it was different. And it was just, I captured the essence of everything. And the spirit of our language shines through in that song. You could feel it. And that's what I believe guided me through rewriting it. I really like the first rhythms and the melody and how it went, but I didn't feel that connection was there. I didn't feel that this is it. This is a song that everyone wants to sing. Then when I did the next one and it just came out like that, and that's why I had to record it right away, because that's what I believe spirit's talking through me. And I might have tapped into an ancient thing that I'm just starting to understand now. When William Wonston Jr. and I were talking on the phone and he was telling me how to hone in on the drum, how to balance my voice when I have my drum and I'm hitting it. I'm trying to resonate and tune my voice to this, and you could hear the second level of vocal cords activate. That's what I'm supposed to be doing as a male singer, is honing into that. Then he says, once you create that vibration, it's like your ancestors are there singing and you're interpreting that. And then it comes out in you because all you are is a conduit. That was beautiful. Now imagine the people that are not into our spiritual backgrounds. They don't know our ancestral ways and they're afraid of it. I could see a lot of my teachings on here being very controversial to the elders because just under the secret societies, like, we don't talk about that. And they look around like they're going to get hexed straight away because they don't understand spirits and stuff anymore. But how could you not talk about it when all winter ceremony was about this? This was all just normal to us. There was no such thing as witch doctors. They were called that after contact. They're all medicine people. They're only called witch doctors because they could do feats that not many people can. And that's what, doesn't matter what level of Christianity interpreted it as, witches, you know. And look at Kitimat. How many different levels of Christianity do we have?
Lots.
I think like 7 different churches.
I think there's
So
like 12
imagine,
or 15.
yeah, probably, yeah. So imagine their interpretation. And the way I do it for cultural ancestral education is, imagine never seeing these people ever. Now you see a person in their spiritual protection. Their face is ash completely black. They're wearing big cedar things, so the spirits, what we call it, Zeeks, can't jump in and take them over or attack them. Then there's a sick person there, and they're simply just having medicine and blowing it over them. From an outsider who's never seen that prior, it'd probably be pretty scary. And then have the guy with the black face look over at you. Like, imagine how that felt for them.
Mm-hmm.
And still to this day, what is not understood is scary. When we're not understanding all of that stuff, eh?
Mm-hmm.
You could see the spirit of our language took over today because we're up to the last 5 minutes of today's episode, and it feels like we just sat down. I think today was a really good, soft, calm talk, and to start understanding maybe where some of these feelings are coming from, and just keep pushing forward, even if it's one word at a time. Be gentle and find the right teachers that work for you. Myself and Ab were adamant on not laughing at anybody, and correcting them in a gentle way where it's inviting, not pointing. It's like this because it's like this. Like, that energy doesn't work for learning. If you wanna learn, you have to find someone who's gentle and just wants to teach you the best of their ability, to the best of their knowledge. And that's all we can do at this point. Wait 5 years, and what are Ab's lessons gonna look like? What are my lessons gonna look like? So thanks everyone that showed up. I'm really, really enjoying this. I could really feel my healing journey. I could actually see it in my eyes. I'm starting to feel really, really great doing these things, and it's brought me abundance of healing. So thanks for the opportunity. I'm gonna keep showing up as long as I can keep doing this. So wow, thank you.
Giving thanks for our journey of returning, giving thanks for the returning of our language and all the things that nourish and support that journey. Giving thanks at this time for the spirit of our language and the curiosity and fascination in learning what that is and how it takes form. Giving thanks at this time for all the things that support the journey of receiving that language back. Honoring and giving thanks for the coming together of hearts at this time in the way of learning and receiving and healing. Giving thanks for the knowledge keepers and our ancestors for keeping that light inside of us big and strong as we find our way back. And honoring and giving thanks for moments of inspiration and connection that sustain and uplift our spirit. Giving thanks at this time for the depth of this winter that we're in, and the way the darkness that surround us makes the lights that shine even brighter in that darkness. Honoring and giving thanks at this time for our strong lights inside, for our spirits, and for our hearts. Honoring our bodies emotionally, physically, spiritually, and mentally, and all the things that uphold our wellness for those bodies. Giving thanks for all the things that sustain and uphold our wellness, big and small, seen and unseen. And giving thanks and acknowledgement for the steady drumbeat beating in union with the heartbeat of Mother Earth. Honoring our Mother Earth for the ways in which she holds us and guides us and teaches us and nourishes us in a good way, in a loving way, in a sacred way.